Picture the back door of the greatest city in England, not the front door with its spires and its guild halls and its goldsmiths' rows. The back door, the side where the city throws everything it doesn't want to look at. Now fill it with prisons, 5 of them packed into a mile of riverbank. Add bear pits where dogs die screaming on a Sunday afternoon, inns where carriers from Kent sleep 4 to a bed, tanneries that smell like death boiled in a vat, and one bridge, a single bridge, the only dry way across the river for miles, with the heads of traitors drying on poles above its southern gate. That's Southwark, the borough at the foot of London Bridge, the city's shadow, the city's servant, the city's rubbish heap. A place where you could be splashed by a bishop's barge in the morning and step over a dead dog by noon. A place where the finest linen in London comes to be washed by women who own 2 smocks between them. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists gawking up at the bridge and the heads. We're going into the washhouse yards and the market crowds and the freezing river stairs. 1 year, 1 woman, everything she would have seen, smelled, carried, scrubbed and survived. So I make these history stories, and honestly I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about lie burns and traitors' heads while you drift off. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not just one smell, it's layers. Wet wool, first, because there is always wet wool, hanging from the rafters a foot above your face, dripping in the dark with a slow patience that will outlive you. Under that, the sharp bite of lye, wood ash and water, soaked so deep into the floorboards and your own knuckles that you no longer know where the washhouse ends and your hands begin. Under that, the river at low tide, mud and fish guts and everything 500,000 people upstream have thrown into the water since yesterday. And under it all, the warm, sour animal smell of human beings who last saw a bath in summer, including you. Welcome to Southwark, on the south bank of the Thames, in the spring of the year 1553. You're lying on a straw pallet in a loft above a washhouse, in a yard off Long Southwark, the great high street that runs from the bridge foot down toward Kent. Below you, through the gaps in the floorboards, you can see the faint red eye of the banked fire under the copper. If that fire's gone out in the night, this day is already ruined, and it hasn't even started. Your name is Ellen Marsh. You're 26 years old, and you came here 3 years ago from Maidstone in Kent, with exactly 1 spare smock, your mother's wooden washing beetle, and a sister. The sister is the warm, bony weight pressed against your back right now, still asleep, breathing through her mouth. Nan. 14 years old, all elbows and opinions. You share the pallet the way you share everything, because privacy is a luxury nobody at your level can afford, and honestly in January you're glad of her. In May, less so. Back home in Maidstone, when your father died of a fever and your mother followed him within the year, everyone said London would swallow 2 orphaned girls whole. They weren't wrong. It swallowed you. You're just still alive inside it. The bells begin. St. Saviour's is closest, the great church by the bridge foot that everyone still calls St. Mary Overy, its old name, the way Londoners never let go of anything. Its bells are so near that you don't so much hear them as feel them, in your teeth, in the boards under your palate. And behind them, across the water, comes the rest of it. Dozens of churches, scores of them, the whole city ringing itself awake, bell answering, bell from Westminster down to the Tower. They say there are more than 100 churches over there. On a still morning you'd believe it. Those bells have been dragging people out of bed since before your grandmother's grandmother was born. That's already an old sound in 1553. You need to get up. Mistress Fletcher will have your hide if the first buck isn't laid by the time it's properly light. And here is the first thing you should understand about this day, before your feet even touch the floor. The city over the river runs on wool and silver and ink. This side runs on women. Every clean shirt on every alderman's back, every sheet on every inn-bed, every loaf, every jug of ale, every fire lit before dawn, every bucket of water carried up from the river stairs is a woman's arms. Nobody writes it down. Nobody pays it much. Nobody sees clean linen. They only see dirty. You will hear men over the water say sometimes that women do not work. You have thought about this while wringing sheets in February, when your hands split at the knuckles and bled into the rinse water. You've decided the men who say it have never once wondered how their shirt got clean. The floor of the loft is cold under your bare feet. Not the honest cold of stone, but the damp cold of old wood in a house by a river. Cold that gets into your ankle bones and stays. You dress in the dark because you could dress in your grave. You've done it so many times. Smock first, the one you slept in, no time for the other. Then the kirtle of russet wool, laced up the front with a cord that's been broken and knotted twice. Then the apron, still stiff with yesterday. Then the coif over your hair, tied under your chin, because a grown woman with her hair loose in the street is either a bride, a mad woman, or advertising something, and you can't afford to be mistaken for any of the three. Every piece of this clothing is a sentence in the language the whole street reads without thinking. Russet says poor but honest. The linen coif, boiled white, says careful, respectable, godly. Your one pride is hidden at the hem of the kirtle, and it isn't decoration. It's a coin, a silver penny of old King Harry VII, fine metal from before the money went bad, sewn into the hem with wax thread, by your mother's own hands the winter she died. Against the worst day, she said, you've been hungry with that penny an inch from your fingers and never once touched it. The worst day, whatever it will be, has not come yet. You will know it when it comes. Nan groans and burrows into the warm spot you've left. You put your cold hand on her neck, which is cruelty, but efficient cruelty. Up, fire, then water. The fire's your work. The fire was my work when you were 11. You're 14. Up. She sits up with the tragic slowness of the young, hair stuck flat on one side, and starts hunting for her coif in the dark. 3 years ago, when you led her off the Maidstone carrier's cart at the Christopher Inn with everything you both owned in one bundle, she cried for a week. Now she can curse a fishwife to a standstill, and not a clothesline in a wind. London does that. It doesn't make you harder exactly, it makes you quicker. Down the ladder into the yard. The sky over the rooftops is the colour of dishwater, with one cold star still hanging on above the bridge. The yard is small, maybe 20 feet by 30, and every inch of it works for its living. The well of drying poles, the great copper in its brick furnace under a lean-to roof, the bucking tubs ranged along the wall like fat grey aldermen, the stone trough, the pile of split firewood you stacked yourself and count the way a miser counts angels. You open the little iron door of the furnace, and there, thank God, a seam of red still glows in the grey. You feed it wood shavings, then splinters, then split billets, kneeling on the cold cobbles and blowing until your eyes water, and the smoke claws your throat, and the flames catch with a sound like tearing cloth. Heat crawls out against your face, the first good thing of the day. By the time you've swung the first yoke of buckets onto your shoulders, the borough is waking around you. You can hear the carters swearing their way out of the inn yards along Long Suffolk, iron tyres grinding on stone, and the first pigs are out trotting down the gutters with their ears flapping, eating the night's garbage. Yes, pigs, loose in the street. That's normal. Half of Southwark keeps a pig the way the city keeps clerks, and the pigs are better at their job. They are the closest thing this borough has to a sanitation service. The water stairs are 2 lanes away, down a gap between houses so narrow your shoulders brush both walls. The tide is making, which means the water is coming up brown and quick, and there's already a queue. There is always a queue. Water is the first tax on every poor woman's day, paid in shoulders and time. No pipes bring water to a house like yours. Every drop you'll boil, wash with, cook with, and drink today walks up from this river or a well on somebody's back, and the back is nearly always a woman's. Joan Barker is ahead of you in the line, broad as a church door with her sleeves already rolled. Joan brews ale in the yard next to yours, which makes her your neighbour, your rival for the pump of gossip, and the nearest thing you have in this world to an aunt. Ellen. She doesn't turn around. She knows your step. The bakers were saying, up at the market cross, the penny loaf's to be made smaller again. It's already small enough to lose in a fist. Tell that to the price of wheat. She hauls her buckets up the steps, water sloshing silver in the half-light, and looks back at you with her flat, sensible face. Bad money, dear bread. Same story since we were girls. Mind your footing. The third step's greased with weed. The third step is greased with weed. It has been greased with weed since the flood. You mind your footing. The full yoke bites into your shoulders through kirtle and smock both. 2 buckets swinging. 40-odd pounds of river trying to find its way back to the river with every step. You make that walk 6 times before most of the city across the water has had its breakfast. Your shoulders stopped complaining about it 2 years ago. They just change shape instead. You've seen it on every washerwoman on the bank, the roll of muscle at the base of the neck, the forearms like a waterman's. Ladies keep their skin white and their hands soft, and there are days you'd trade and days you watch a lady being handed across a puddle like glass and think, I can carry my own weight in water. What exactly can you do? Then you remember that what she can do is have you whipped for saying it, and you keep walking. By the 6th trip, Mistress Agnes Fletcher is in the yard. She's a small woman, which surprises people, because her voice arrives before she does, and it's built like a drayman. 54 years old, a widow dressed in decent black that's gone green-grey at the seams, with a face like a well-kept blade and hands that could crack walnuts. Those hands can tell fine Holland from cheap flax in the dark by touch alone, and tell you the price of each to the farthing while they're at it. She has run this wash-house for near 30 years, 20 of them beside her husband and the last 2 alone, and she holds the custom of 2 inns, a brew-house, the church, and, the jewel of it all, a merchant's household across the bridge. You're late, she says, without looking up from the bucking tub. You're not late. She says this every morning, to you, to Nan, to the daylight itself. You've learned it isn't an accusation, it's a bell. It means the day has begun, stand to your post. You've learned not to argue with bells. The linen from the Christopher came in last night, she goes on. 40 sheets, and every one of them smelling of carrier. And Mistress Crane's basket goes back over the bridge today, so the fine things get first water, not last. And if I find tallow spots on her husband's shirts again, I'll boil the pair of you instead. Nan. Ash. Nan, who has just staggered into the yard with the last buckets, gives you a look over Agnes's shoulder, the ancient look of the young for the old, and goes for the ash. And here you should understand what washing actually is, because whatever you're picturing, it isn't this. There is no soap powder. There is no soap at all for most of it. Black soap costs a penny the pound, and Agnes hoards it like a relic, for collars and cuffs and nothing else. What there is lye. You take wood ash, the whitest and cleanest you can get, pack it into the bottom of a bucking tub over a bed of straw, lay the linen in coil upon coil, and then pour hot water through the whole of it, over and over, catching what runs out the tap at the bottom, heating it again, pouring it again, hour upon hour, while the ash turns the water into something that eats grease, eats stains, eats the skin off your hands if you're careless, and slowly turns 40 filthy sheets the colour of old cheese back into something white. That's a buck wash. It takes from before dawn until after dark. It happens once a fortnight in this yard on the great scale, and small washes fill every day between. Anyone who tells you washing is one of the lighter chores has never stood over a copper in August. The quality of the ash is everything, and this is the first of your small treasures. Under your pallet in the loft sits an earthen crock with a wooden lid, and in that crock, kept dry as gunpowder, is the finest ash in the borough. White oak ash from the bread ovens of the Christopher Inn, sieved through a cloth, begged and bargained out of the inn's baker, a hatful at a time in exchange for mending, and hoarded against the day the common ash runs short or comes to you wet. River damp ash is dead ash. It gives you grey water and grey linen. Your crock is bone dry and half full, and you add to it the way other women add to a dowry. Agnes knows about it and pretends not to. In her book, a girl who hoards good ash will do. The second treasure in this house is not yours, and you have never once touched it. On the shelf above Agnes's bed, wrapped in a lambswool clout inside a little box, sits a slick stone, a smoothing stone of black glass, the size and shape of a flattened pear with a knob to grip, brought over from Flanders, that her Roger bought her off a peddler for 8p the year the French war started up again. When linen is washed and dried, it comes up rough and creased. A slick stone, rubbed hard over the cloth on a board, presses it smooth and puts a shine on good Holland like ice on a pond. Any washerwoman can scrub. The slicking is where the craft shows the difference between clean and finished. Agnes smooths the crane's fine linen herself, every piece, with Roger's stone, and no other hand in this yard has ever been suffered to hold it. You have watched her do it 100 times. The small circles, the lean of the shoulder, the particular listening look on her face, and you have understood without being told that this is not entirely about linen. Roger Fletcher has been dead 2 years next July. Nobody in this yard says the word sweat where Agnes can hear it. You lay the first buck, straw, then ash, then the coiled sheets, your arms in to the elbow, the reek of the carrier men rising off the cloth, horse, tallow, ale, sweat, the whole road from Rochester in one lungful. You settle the buckcloth over the top, and Nan begins hauling the first hot water from the copper, and the day finds its rhythm, which is the rhythm of pouring, always pouring. And when I say the water is hot, Agnes says, in the tone she uses for teaching, because Nan is within earshot and Nan is still being finished like a rough hem, I mean it will scald the fool who slops it. Small steps. Full bucket. Small steps. A burned wrist doesn't ring. Small steps. Full bucket, small steps. You heard the same words yourself 3 years ago. The lessons in this trade are all short because your breath is needed elsewhere. While the lie works, nobody stands idle, because standing idle is a thing that happens to other people, richer people, imaginary people. This is the truth of the title of this whole story, if you want it plainly. What did poor women really do all day? Everything. All of it. At once. Nan settles on the stool by the yard door with the distaff under her arm and the spindle dropping and climbing, spinning flax into thread, because every woman and girl in this realm spins in the cracks of every day. Thread is the one crop that never fails and never rots, and the peddler pays coin for a good pound of it. You mend while the buck drains, needle flashing along a sheet's torn hem, 11 stitches to the inch, because Agnes will count them. Agnes herself stands at the trough scrubbing collars with the precious black soap, and between the three of you flows the other great river of this house, quieter than the Thames. Talk. Who is sick at the tabard? Whose apprentice ran off? What the baker said at the cross? Which searcher of the market can be trusted, and which one weighs his thumb? Men call it gossip. You call it the news, and it is worth more than the printed kind, because it is about people who can actually reach you. Mid-morning, the yard door bangs and Joan Barker fills it, flour on one cheek, fury on the whole face. The connor's been. The ale connor, the official taster who sits his breeches on a bench sopped in ale to judge the brew, or so the old joke runs. Condemned my whole second brewing. Sour, he says. Sour! She says the word the way other women say murderer. 14 shillings a malt in that brewing. He'd know sour. God, what he's pickled in it. Was it sour? Agnes asks, not looking up from the trough. A silence. Joan's chin comes up, then down. The back of it, maybe. A little. And then, with the sudden deflation of a woman doing sums quietly, the weather turned on me. Thunder in the air curdles a brew faster than sin. She sits down on the wood pile, uninvited, welcome. 14 shillings, Agnes. I'll be hawking it as small ale at a farthing the gallon, and glad of the farthing. Then hawk it, says Agnes, and brew again Thursday, and scald your tubs twice this time. Which is Agnes's way of saying, you'll live. In this borough, among these women, that passes for an embrace. Brewing, you should know, is women's work too, and has been time out of mind. An alewife in every third yard, her ale stake thrust out over the door when the brew is ready. But it's changing, even now, even here. The beer men, with their Dutch hops and their big brew houses down by the river, make a drink that keeps for months where honest ale keeps for days, and every year they take a little more of the trade, and every year there are fewer alewives and more brewers' clerks. Joan calls hopped beer bilge water, Dutch puddle, a Lenten penance. Joan is also, you happen to know, exactly stubborn enough to be quietly asking the Flemish cooper's wife by St. Olave's how hops are handled. You've seen which way that river is flowing. The penny loaf, when Nan runs to the market cross and back for bread at noon, is smaller than it was at Christmas. Not the price, the loaf. That's how bread works in this year of grace. The penny loaf always costs a penny, and when wheat grows dear, the loaf itself shrinks, ounce by lawful ounce. So a poor woman feels the harvest not in her purse, but in her hand, in the weight of what a penny brings home. You heft it, and your palm does the arithmetic your head never learned from any book, and your stomach signs the account. Lighter again. You eat standing up, all 4 of you in the yard, bread and a rind of cheese and Joan's condemned ale, which is in fairness only a little sour at the back. Nobody at your level eats sitting down at midday. Sitting is for supper if the supper's earned. In the early afternoon, Agnes packs the great basket. Mistress Crane's linen, washed last week, dried on the poles, smoothed by Agnes's own hand with the black stone, sheets folded to the width of her forearm, shirts with their collars laid just so, smocks, coifs, kerchiefs, all of it layered with sprigs of dried lavender, all of it whiter than anything in your own life will ever be. The basket loaded weighs as much as Nan. It rides on your head, on a coiled cloth ring, the way your mother carried and her mother before her, your neck straight, your spine doing work that would astonish a mason. Straight over, straight back, Agnes says. The bridge, not the boat. Boats cost pennies. Legs are paid for. The bridge. You could complain, but there is no point complaining about London Bridge any more than about weather. It is simply there, as it has been there for 350 years. The only dry crossing of the Thames this side of Kingston. 19 stone arches marching across the river, and on top of them, because this city cannot leave a profitable inch alone, an entire street of houses and shops, 4 and 5 stories of them, leaning toward each other overhead until the roadway between runs like a tunnel, with ribbons of daylight in it. Your grandmother's grandmother's grandmother could have walked across those same stone piers. The houses burn and fall and are built again. The stone below just goes on standing in the river, taking the water's punishment century after century. The name Southwark, by the way, is only Southwark, worn smooth, the southern fort, the works at the bridge's southern end, from the days when men fortified the crossing against whoever was coming up the river to burn London that year. That's all this borough has ever been when you strip it down, the thing that stands in front of the bridge. At the bridge foot the crowd thickens to a paste. And when I say crowd, I need you to understand what that means on this bridge. The roadway between the houses is 12 feet wide in the best places. Through that gap passes everything and everyone bound between London and the whole south country of England. Carts, coaches, cattle on the hoof, pack horses with panniers of Kentish cherries, drovers, lawyers, pilgrims, players, beggars, a flock of geese being driven to slaughter, and you with a basket on your head the size of a cradle. There are no rules except the one everyone knows. Keep to your side, keep moving, and give way to anything heavier than you, which, when you are a woman on foot, is everything. Above the gate at the Southwark end on poles are the heads. You don't look up any more. Every stranger looks up. That's how you know a stranger. The heads are boiled in salt and tarred, so they last, and they stand up there against the sky as a sermon about the price of treason, and pigeons sit on them, because pigeons have no sense of ceremony at all. 3 years in this borough, and the horror has worn down to a kind of weather. That should trouble you more than it does. Halfway across, through a gap between houses where the roadway opens to a rail, you can look down at the river, and this is the part that still stops your breath. The bridge's 19 piers stand on great boat-shaped platforms of rubble and timber, and those platforms choke the river like a fist around a throat. All the water of the Thames has to force itself through the narrow arches, and at the turning of the tide the river on one side of the bridge stands higher than on the other, 5 feet higher, 6, and the water comes through the arches not like a river but like a mill race, a roaring green chute that can take a boat, flip it, and rub the pieces along the starlings for 100 yards. Watermen call it shooting the bridge, running an arch at speed, and men drown at it every single year. There's a saying every child on both banks knows. The bridge was made for wise men to go over and fools to go under. You stand a moment, basket on head, watching the water pile and boil beneath you. feeling the stone hum faintly under your feet with the force of it. Then a drover curses you for standing, and the city takes you back. The Cranes live in a tall house in a lane off Fish Street Hill, close above the bridge, where the streets smell of money, which is to say, of wood smoke, roasting meat, and other people's horses, rather than of tanneries and tide mud. Master Crane is a merchant of the Drapers' Company, cloth to Antwerp, wine and fine wares back. You have never once entered his house by the front door. You go down the side passage to the kitchen door as fixed as sunrise, and you wait on the step until the cookmaid is pleased to notice you, and this too is part of what poor women really did all day. They waited at doors, at stalls, at stairs, at wells, at the pleasure of everyone one rung up. Nobody counts waiting as work. Try it for a year. Mistress Crane receives the linen herself in the doorway of her parlour, so you see the room past her shoulder, wainscot the colour of chestnuts, a carpet on the table, a carpet, cloth so fine they lay it on furniture, cushions of crewel work, silver candlesticks, a virginal with its lid open. She is 22 years old at most. Her gown would buy Agnes's whole yard. She goes through the basket piece by piece with a small frown she was surely taught by her mother, because finding no fault would set a bad precedent. And at last she says, "The smoothing is well enough," which from her is thunderous praise, and pays over Agnes's 3 shillings for the month counted twice. It happened in this house, a month ago, the thing that you keep folded away next to the memory of your mother's penny. Sorting the foul linen in the Crane's kitchen, you turned back the cuff of one of the master's shirts, and something hard slid into your palm. A gold signet ring, his own, with a long-legged crane cut into the face of it, slipped off a finger gone thin in a wet spring and lost in his own sleeve. It lay in your hand, and your hand closed over it, and for one full breath, you stood very still. A ring like that is 2 years of your wages. There's a man at the bell stairs who asks no questions of anyone. Your palm knew all of this before your head caught up. Then you put it on the kitchen table in front of the cookmaid and said, loudly enough for witnesses, this was in the master's shirt. Because here is the sum a washerwoman lives by, the reckoning under every other reckoning. You handle every week linen worth more than you earn in a year. You're alone with it, over and over, and so the one coin you cannot ever spend is trust. A laundress suspected is a laundress finished, not just here but everywhere, because the wives all dine together and the word runs faster than fire. Honesty, at your level, is not a virtue, it is stock in trade. It is the difference between a living and the road. Master Crane came down to the kitchen himself that day, which the cookmaid said he never does. He looked at the ring and then at you, longer than was comfortable. A big, slow, grey-eyed man who weighs people the way he weighs cloth. "What's your name?" "Ellen Marsh, sir. Mistress Fletcher's woman." "Fletcher's," he said, as if filing it in a ledger. And that was all. But the ring went back on his finger, and your name went into the book he keeps behind his eyes, and you walked back over the bridge that evening not 1 penny richer, and somehow carrying something of weight. Today there is no master, only the young mistress and her frown, and one new thing you notice as she turns away with her linen. The stiff busk line of her bodice has been loosened, and her girdle rides high. By autumn there will be a child in this house. You note it the way you note everything in the houses you serve, silently, exactly, and you carry the notice home to the yard, where it will be traded across the trough like coin. On the way back you take the water. 'cause the tide is fair and your legs, whatever Agnes says about them being paid for, have opinions. At the old Swan Stairs above the bridge, the watermen are ranked like gulls on a rail, crying custom. Oars, sculls, westward. Ho! You want none of them. You want the long-armed man at the end with the grey stubble and the boat kept clean as a kitchen. Tom Hazard, who has rowed this reach since before you were born and has carried you and Agnes's baskets across since your first year here. Ellen Marsh. He hands you down into the wherry like a duchess, which is his joke, and takes the basket like a feather, which is his vanity. Over to the bank? For a penny? For a penny, he agrees, the fare fixed by custom older than either of you, and shoves off into the stream. Between you and Tom there is an account, and like all the accounts of the poor it is kept on wood, not paper. Last winter, a quartern age got into him and shook him like a terrier for 6 weeks, and a waterman who cannot row cannot eat. And through those 6 weeks you washed and mended his shirts for nothing, and left broth with his landlady besides, because Nan liked him, and you did too. When he was on his feet again he cut a tally stick, scored 3 notches in it, split it down the middle and gave you half. 3 dry crossings owed, he said, past the fare whenever you should need them, and God send you never need them. You keep your half of the tally in the box with your needles. You have never yet called a notch due. River's talking, Tom says as he pulls out into the stream, nodding at nothing you can see. Barges going down to Greenwich every day now. Physicians in and out. They say the king mends. They say it the way men say a thing they want listened to, not believed. The king, Edward, 6th of that name, who has been king since you were a girl in Maidstone, and who is 15 years old, and who, the whole river whispers, is coughing his lungs out an oar-stroke at a time down at Greenwich, while great men stand around his bed like gulls around a fish. And what does the river say, you ask? Tom pulls 2 strokes before he answers, the blades coming out of the brown water clean and feathered, an old man's economy of motion. River says what it always says. He isn't smiling now. It gives and it takes, and it's a taking year. He puts you ashore at St. Mary Overy Stairs under the great tower of St. Saviour's, and because it is Tuesday you go, as you go every Tuesday to fetch the church's washing, the surplices, the cloths of the communion table, the poor men's shirts the parish pays to have cleaned out of the alms money. Which brings you to Sir John. Sir John Fowle is the oldest priest you have ever seen, a curate of St. Saviour's, 70 years old if a day, with a face like a walnut left in the rain, and hands that shake at rest and steady. Strangely, only when they are doing something, folding cloth, breaking bread. He was born under the 4th Harry's grandson's grandson, as he puts it, meaning long ago. He was a novice when there were still monks in this very church, before old King Harry pulled the priories down, and he has stood at this altar, or table, or altar again, through every turning of the wheel since. Latin, Master English Prayer Book, images up, images down, and each turn ordered on pain of the law, and each turn obeyed by Sir John with his shaking hands and his steady eyes, because 70 is old to burn. 3 springs ago, the King's Commissioners came through every parish in England making inventories of church goods, the plate, the copes, the cloths, the candlesticks, and this past year they came again, taking, for the King's use. St. Saviour's gave up what it was told to give. But the week before that second visit, Sir John came to Agnes's yard himself, on foot, with a bundle wrapped in a sheet, and said only that here was an old cloth in need of washing and mending, no haste about it, no haste at all. Inside the sheet was an altar frontal, needlework of 2 generations back, a border of vine leaves and wheat ears in thread of gold and green silk, worked, the small folk of the parish will tell you, by the wives of the parish themselves in the old days, a stitch from every household. It has never gone back. It lies at the bottom of Agnes's great coffer, under the spare butt-cloths, folded in your own second-best smock against the damp, and no one has ever spoken of it again. Not Agnes, not Sir John, not you. It isn't stolen. It's waiting. There is a kind of safekeeping that only exists among people too small for anyone to search, and half the old things that survive in England survive that way, in coffers and thatch and bread ovens, in the keeping of women nobody thinks to ask. "How does the cloth, mistress?" is all Sir John says today, counting surplices into your basket in the vestry, not looking at you. "It keeps well, father." "Ah." He looks up, his eyes wet, red-rimmed, cheerful. "Good weather for keeping things." The walk home along the bankside is the length of the borough's whole conscience. You pass the great empty bulk of Winchester Palace, the Bishop of Winchester's London house, its hall glittering with a rose window like a wheel of stone lace. The bishops of Winchester have been lords of this bank for 400 years, and it was under their rule, to their rent, that the stews ran here, the licensed brothels, generations of them, until old King Harry shut them by proclamation 7 years back. Shut the houses, that is, not the trade. The trade just took off its livery. The women are still here in the alleys off the bank, at the tavern doors at dusk. Men still call them Winchester geese, a joke with 400 years of rent behind it. And you have washed for 1 or 2 of them, quietly, Agnes asking no questions, because their coin is as good as a churchwarden's, and their linen, truth be told, better kept. Past the palace, the prisons, one after another, like beads on a dirty string. The clink at the palace wall, the compter in the old church of St. Margaret, the King's Bench and the Marshalsea down the High Street, the White Lion. 5 jails within one borough. From the Marshalsea's grated windows, hands hold out cups on strings, and voices call down for bread, for God's love, for news. Prisoners here pay for their own keep, and those who cannot pay beg through the bars, and one of the fixed sights of your every week is the poor boxman from St. Saviour's carrying broken bread to the grates. And one of the fixed sounds is that calling, which after 3 years you hear the way you hear gulls. Southwark is not a gentle place. You've said it to Nan 100 times the way your mother said Maidstone Market was no place to dawdle. Not as complaint, as compass. And past the prisons, at the western end of the bank, the round timber scaffolds of the bear baiting rise against the sky like a giant's baskets. And this is where Nan's heart lives, to your endless irritation. On baiting days you can hear it from the yard, the roar, wave upon wave, 1/2 mile off, and under the roar, if the wind sits wrong, the dogs. Nan has been twice, with Joan's niece, a penny for standing room, and came home with her eyes like lamps, full of the bear Great Ned, the mastiffs, the man who danced on the rail. There's money on the bank, she informs you now, hauling the church basket at your side, in the tone of an ambassador presenting terms. Girls sell nuts and saffron cakes in the crowds, and take home more in an afternoon than the washhouse pays in a week. Moll Barker's cousin does it. Moll Barker's cousin has a new red petticoat. And what does the crowd pay when it's drunk and the day's takings are in her apron and the lanes are dark going home, you say? You've seen the geese at the tavern doors. Every one of them was a girl with a tray once, thinking herself clever. You sound like Agnes. God send I do. She's quiet for 10 steps. The basket creaks. Somewhere behind the fence a mastiff howls, bored, terrible. The red petticoat, though, Nan says mournfully, and you laugh despite yourself. And she laughs, 14 again instead of 40, and the two of you carry the parish's washing home along the bank of the lordliest, filthiest river in England. This is the shape of a day. Multiply it. Water, fire, lie, pour, scrub, wring, hang, smooth, mend, spin, fetch, carry, wait, reckon, walk, talk, feed, bank the fire, sleep. Market on Wednesdays and Saturdays, the buck wash each fortnight, the church linen Tuesdays, the crane's basket over the bridge and back, and every gap between filled with the spindle, because the spindle is the poor woman's second purse. In a good week, Agnes pays you 10p and Nan 4p with the loft and your pottage found. A labouring man gets 6p a day and thinks himself ill-used. Nobody's going to change that arithmetic for you. Not in your lifetime. You do not waste breath on it. You count what can be counted, the ash crock filling, the thread pound by pound, the tally in the needle box, the penny in the hem, dry enough, warm enough, fed enough. On the good days, all three. That's wealth. At your level. That's the whole of it. Supper is at dark, in Agnes's kitchen, which is the back room of the wash-house. Pottage of peas and a little bacon, bread, Joan's ale when Joan is in funds or in need of company, which is most evenings since her husband died and her son took a bargeman's berth at Queen Hithe. 4 women at a scrub table by rushlight. This, too, no one will ever write down, and yet you'd set it against any Guildhall feast in London. The day sorted and judged, the borough's news assayed like coin, Joan mimicking the ale connor's face until Nan chokes, Agnes delivering sentence on all persons living and some dead. The rushlight burns with its small steady hiss, dear enough that when the talk runs long, Agnes pinches it out and the last of it happens in the dark, voices only, and no one minds. Half your life happens in the dark. Candles are for people who are paid by daylight. And then the loft, and the pallet, and Nan's cold feet, and the wet wool dripping its slow sermon, and the last sounds of the borough. A watchman's staff on stone, a dog, a burst of singing from the Christopher's yard cut off by a slam shutter. The river always under everything like blood in your own ears. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after. And you will hear people in centuries you'll never see say that nothing happened in such lives, that history was made elsewhere, by men on horses, in rooms with carpets on the tables. But it is a taking year. Tom Hazard said so, and the river is older than the men on horses. Before June is out, the bells will tell you so. In this borough, it is not roosters that rule the hours, it is the bells. They ring for services, for deaths, for fires, and once in a great while for the turning of the world. You have heard them do it once already in your life, when the old king died and you were a child in Kent, every steeple in the valley tolling at once, and your father standing still in the yard with his shears in his hand. You are about to hear it again. It begins, like most great things in your life, with linen. In the last week of June, the foul basket from the Christopher comes in heavier than usual, and Master Osborne, the innkeeper, comes with it, which he never does. Osborne is a slab of a man of 50-odd, bald as an egg, who counts a farthing 3 times before he lets it go and calls that husbandry. He stands in the yard, turning his cap in his hands, and haggles with Agnes over the fortnight's rate as he always does. And Agnes stands him off as she always does, 8p the 40 sheets and not a feather less, and then, at the gate, with the business done, he doesn't leave. Full house, he says to no one. Full stables, riders on the Dover road thick as May flies, and every man of them close-mouthed as a purse. He looks at the sky over the river, where the swifts are screaming round the tower of St. Saviour's. I've kept this in 30 year. I know what a road sounds like before news comes up it. 2 weeks later, on a grey Thursday morning that smells of rain and tide mud, the 6th of July gone and nobody yet told. King Edward VI dies at Greenwich, 15 years old, 3 miles down the water from where you stand pouring lye through other men's shirts. You know none of it. That is the thing to hold on to in this story and in every story about people like you. The great turnings arrive in Suffolk the way weather arrives, from a distance, in signs. For 2 days, the river is wrong. Tom Hazard, setting down a fare at the Overy Stairs, tells you the watermen are being turned away from the Greenwich Reach by boats full of harnessed men. No explanations. The Kentish carriers at the inns are held at the bridge and questioned coming and going. Joan hears from the cooper's wife, who hears from the steelyard men, that the tower has been victualled and the gates doubled. Nobody says the word, everybody carries it. And then, on the 10th of July, criers and trumpets over the water, and the word comes across the bridge like a wave over a weir. The king is dead, God rest him, and his cousin, the Lady Jane, Northumberland's son's new-wed wife, 16 years old, is proclaimed Queen of England. You're in the market when it's cried on this side, wedged in the Saturday crowd between the fish stalls, Nan's sleeve in your fist. And you will remember all your life what you hear when the crier rolls up his paper. Nothing, no cheer, no cap in the air, 1,000 people in a market, and a silence like the moment after a dropped pot, everyone looking at everyone, nobody first to speak, because every soul in that crowd, fishwife and carter and cut-purse alike, does the same arithmetic in the same instant. The old king had 2 daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, and whatever lawyers have written on whatever parchment, there they stand, alive, and the eldest not named. A boy in the crowd, some vintner's lad, they say later, calls out that the Lady Mary has the better right, and is gone, hustled off between 2 liveried shoulders before you can even see his face, and the crowd closes over the place where he was like water over a stone. You learn afterward that they set him in the pillory and cropped his ears for it. That is the sound of politics arriving in a poor woman's day. A silence, and a boy's voice, and the pillory. You take Nan's arm and you go home and you wash. What else? The lie does not care who is queen. The Christopher's sheets do not wash themselves for grief. When the world goes uncertain overhead, people like you go small and quiet and keep working, the way beasts go still under thunder. Agnes puts it in 6 words, over the trough, and it becomes one of the yard's fixed laws, quoted for years after. We wash, we do not ask. For 9 days England has 2 queens, and Southwark holds its breath and works. The bridge rattles day and night with horsemen. Northumberland rides out through the city with his troops to take the Lady Mary, who has slipped away into East Anglia, and the crowds watch him go. And Osborne, who watches roads for a living, says the thing everyone is thinking. No man cries Godspeed. Not one voice, all down the street. An army riding out in silence, he says, is a beaten army that hasn't heard it yet. Then, on the 19th of July, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, with your arms in a rinsing trough, and Nan hanging smocks on the poles, every bell in London goes off at once. You know before anyone tells you. Bells have grammar. There is the single bell for service, the slow toll for a passing soul. And then there is this. every steeple from Westminster to the Tower ringing full peals over each other, wave on wave of bronze, the sound rolling across the water and breaking against the Surrey hills, a sound you feel in your breastbone like a second heart. The council in London has turned its coat altogether and proclaimed Mary, the old king's daughter, Queen of England, and the 9 days' queen is a prisoner in the Tower she was lately mistress of. That evening the whole city goes briefly, entirely mad with relief. Bonfires bloom in every street on both banks, sparks going up against the summer dusk like a second field of stars. Tables are hauled out of doors, and men who have not spoken to their neighbours since Candlemas sit drinking with them till midnight. There is singing on the bridge itself. Joan rolls out what remains of the condemned brewing and gives it away free at her gate, at a farthing profit of pure goodwill. And even Agnes sits on the wood-pile with a cup, and you dance, actually dance, in the High Street of Southwark with Nan and Joan's niece, and half the borough, while the heads on the bridge gate look down on the fires with their tarred faces, saying what they always say, which is nothing. You will think of that night often, later. How simple it seemed. The rightful blood restored, the wheel turned home, God's plain hand in it. Bonfires are honest things. It's the years after them that are complicated. Not 2 months on, the men of the borough will be pulled to watch Northumberland lose his head on Tower Hill, and the talk at supper will be all of how the great Duke turned his coat at the last and died professing the old faith, and Agnes will say only, "Again, we wash, we do not ask," but you will notice she says it quieter. Every wheel that turns lifts someone and grinds someone. At your level of the world, you feel a turning wheel mainly as a change in what it is safe to say out loud. And that summer, for the first time in your grown life, you feel everyone around you begin, very slightly, to choose their words. It is a small thing. It is like the river going wrong before the news comes. You note it, the way you note everything, and you keep pouring. The new queen comes into her city on the 3rd of August, through Aldgate on the far side, with the Lady Elizabeth riding behind her, and they say 10,000 horse. You don't see it. Poor women on the wrong bank do not see coronations and entries. They hear them, a day-long rumour of trumpets and ordnance rolling over the water while the wash goes on, and they see the aftermath, which in your case is linen. The inns packed to the rafters for weeks, gentlemen's shirts by the dozen in the Christopher's baskets, lace-edged, fine and filthy, because gentlemen on great occasions sweat like carters. The Queen's fortune is proclaimed with trumpets. Yours arrives in a basket and smells of other men's triumph. You boil it. At Michaelmas the real coronation comes. The last day of September, the procession through the city, and this time Agnes, in a fit of something she'd deny was softness, shuts the yard at noon and takes you both onto the bridge, where the crowd stands so thick between the houses that the whole roadway is one warm swaying animal. You see over shoulders in slices, hangings of arras and cloth of gold on the fronts of the houses, the flash of the conduits, which they say ran wine that day in Cheapside, a fountain of it, in a city where you queue an hour for brown river water. You see for half of one heartbeat between two heads, a canopy passing on the far shore, a glint of white and gold in an open litter. That is your queen, half a heartbeat at half a mile. Nan is silent all the way home, which for Nan is a fever symptom. At the yard gate she says, "Wine in the conduits, wine in the same pipes as water." On the far bank, you say, "Not in ours." "One day I'll stand on the near side of a thing," says Nan, 14 years old, with the basket ring still on her head, and marches in to bank the fire, and you stand a moment in the gateway with your heart turned over, because that is the truest prayer you have ever heard anyone pray, and you have never once dared pray it yourself. October brings fog off the river, and the first ice skin on the trough water, and change comes to St. Saviour's the way it always comes, by law from above. Parliament in Westminster spends the autumn unmaking what the last rain made. The English service is to go, the Latin Mass is to come back come December. Sir John reads out the notice of it after service in a voice like dry leaves, and you watch the parish take it as the parish takes everything, some faces shining, some shut like shutters, most simply tired, keeping their thoughts folded away with their Sunday clothes. It is the third great turning of the wheel in Sir John's priesthood, the fourth if you count fine differences, and men and women who have twice been told to forget what their mothers taught them, and once been told to remember it, are now told to remember it again, on pain of the law. What do if you're poor and prudent? You go to church. You stand where you're told, kneel when your neighbours kneel, and keep your soul's private ledger in the one place no commissioner has ever audited. Your mother taught you her prayers in Latin. The law taught you afterward to pray in English. You find, if you are honest, that in the dark, in fear, it is your mother's words that come. You do not examine this. It is not a year for examining things out loud, but one piece of it is yours. On the second Sunday of Advent, Sir John comes to the yard again, on foot in the cold, with the vestry key on his girdle, and says to Agnes, in the manner of a man asking about weather, that if that old cloth were mended, now might be the season for it. You lift the frontal out of the coffer that evening by rushlight, all three of you around the table, and unfold your second best smock from about it, and there it lies, a little musty, utterly unharmed. The vine leaves, the wheat ears, the thread of gold catching the small flame like a live thing. A year and a half it has lain under the butt-cloths while men with inventory came and went. Agnes runs it through her hands, seam by seam, the way she reads all cloth, and her face in the rushlight is the face she turns on the black slick stone, and she says, "The wives of this parish worked that border when my mother was a girl. There's a stitch in it from every house on this bank, ours among them. You mend the three places that want mending, 11 stitches to the inch, your own stitch going in among the dead wives' stitches, which is as close to a monument as your kind is ever offered. And at the first Mass of Christmas at St. Saviour's, in a church packed to the pillars, breath rising like incense in the candlelight, the frontal is on the altar, and old Sir John's hands, which shake at rest, are steady as stone all the length of the office. He finds you after, in the churchyard, in the cold. He doesn't thank you. Priests of his vintage are careful with thanks. Thanks are evidence. A cloth is only a cloth, he says, looking at the tower against the winter stars. But keeping is a kind of faith, mistress. Whatever they order altered next, and they will, remember that much. Kingdoms are kept the same way linen is. A pause, his breath a small ghost. By somebody unregarded, taking pains. Christmas that year is the best you can remember. Goose from Osborne, off the book, because the Queen's peace has been good for the roads, and the roads are good for innkeepers. Joan's first hopped brewing, which she serves defiantly, and which is to her visible fury excellent, and sells to the Christopher by 12th night at a better rate than her ale ever fetched. Nan turned 15 at Martinmas and given her first wages rise, 6pence now, and a pair of knitted hose from Agnes, which mortifies and delights her in equal parts. On Twelfth Night itself there is snow, softening even Southwark, laying white even on the gibbet cage at the bridge foot, and the four of you sit late by an actual candle, wax, Agnes's one yearly extravagance, and Joan sings the carol of the cherry tree in a voice like a cracked bell, and it is, though you do not know to call it this, the last quiet night of the old world. Because in the second week of January the news comes up the Dover Road that undoes everything, and it comes, as all news comes to you, through linen and inns and the mouths of women at a trough. The Queen will marry, not an English lord, Philip, Prince of Spain, the Emperor's son. It is signed, or all but signed. The Spanish envoys have been at court through the frosts. It is proclaimed openly before the month is out. You cannot, standing at your trough with your arms in grey water, tell the Emperor from the Pope's cook, and you'd say so. But you don't need schooling to read your own street, and your street goes dark over that news the way a yard goes dark when a cloud crosses. The talk at the market cross-curdles. Spaniards in England, English wombs carrying Spanish kings, the realm a province like Naples. True or foolish, it doesn't matter. Fear doesn't check its sums. Osborne's carriers bring word that in Kent, your Kent, the gentlemen are riding from house to house at night, and the smiths are busy, and not with ploughshares. Wyatt, a carrier says in the Christopher's yard low to Osborne, while you and Nan load fowl sheets 3 feet away, invisible as furniture, which is how servants hear everything. Sir Thomas Wyatt of Allington, he's raised his standard at Maidstone. Maidstone, your own market town, the castle a walk from your father's old tenter grounds. You have sold thread within sight of its gate. Rebellion is not a word from a proclamation any more. It has your home's name in its mouth, and it is coming up the Dover Road, the way everything comes, toward the bridge, and the bridge stands at the end of your street. Agnes hears you both out that evening, arms folded, and issues her orders as if rebellion were a weather. Flour and peas in the house, all the water crocks full, the wood in under cover, both baskets finished and delivered early, city side and bank side, and the accounts squared, because coin owed is coin lost the day trouble starts, and neither of you across that bridge after Candlemas without my word. She looks at the pair of you, and something in her face is older than her own memory, is every widow in every borough on every army's road since Rome. I've seen soldiers come up a street twice in my life, she says. Both times the men talked of causes, and both times when it was over it was the women out at dawn washing the street. The last week of January is a lesson in how fear actually arrives in a poor household, not as trumpets, as prices and absences and small wrongnesses in the day. The Kentish carriers stop coming, first the Dover men, then the Rochester men, and the Christopher's stable yard goes quiet as a Lent Friday, and Osborne stands in it like a man on a dock watching for a sail. Eggs double at the Saturday market, salt fish goes up by half. The penny loaf, which needed no rebellion to shrink, shrinks. Joan's ale sells out by noon each day because troubled men drink, and Joan, who has buried one husband and one rising already in her lifetime, takes the coin with a mouth like a sprung trap and salts it away in places even you don't know. Word comes up the road in pieces, each piece worse. The Queen's men have gone down into Kent to scatter the rebels. Then, the Queen's men have not scattered the rebels. The old Duke of Norfolk marched to Rochester with the London Whitecoats, the city's own trained bands, And at the bridge over the Medway, the whitecoats turn their coats in a body, shouting, so it's told at every fireside on the bank, we are all Englishmen, and went over to Wyatt, guns and all, and the old Duke came back to London with his officers and precious little else. London's own sons marched out against Kent, come home Kentishmen. You hear it retold 4 times in 2 days, and each telling is a little louder and a little more frightened, because if the city's own bands will not fight, who exactly stands between this borough and 30,000 angry men? The number grows in the telling too. It always does. Fear does its own arithmetic, and it never subtracts. You are Kentish yourself, and that week you feel it in the street for the first time in 3 years. Nothing said. A pause at the fish stall when you open your mouth and Maidstone falls out of it in every vowel. A second look from the constable at the bridge foot. Nan feels it too, and comes home from the bakehouse queue with her jaw set white, having been asked by a woman she has queued beside for 3 years whether her friends were coming to burn the borough. At supper she is savage about it. 15 and betrayed. You let her run on until she's done, and then you tell her the truth as you have paid for it. We're poor, Nan. Poor folk are always half foreign, even to their own street. It only shows when the weather turns. On the 1st of February, a Thursday, the Queen does the thing that saves her crown. She rides into the city, to the Guildhall, and speaks to the Londoners herself. You have the speech by heart within 2 days, as does every soul on both banks, in 6 versions, because men who are there stand in every tavern being bought ale to say it again. How she called herself wedded to the realm, her coronation ring her marriage ring. How she said she could not tell how naturally a mother loves her child, having never borne one, but that she loved her subjects as a mother loves. How the hall roared, say what you will of princes, and privately at the trough with the water loud you and Jones say a good deal. That was bravely done, and it turns the city like a key. London Arms, the gates are shut and watched, and on your bank men come at the bridge house warden's bidding and do a thing you watch with your own eyes from the wharf by St. Olave's, a thing that makes the whole borough gasp like one body. They break the bridge, not the stone, the drawbridge, the great timber leaf near the city end that lifts for masted ships. They cut it down entire, hoist away the timbers, and leave a gap of cold grey air over the roaring tide race, with the city's gate and portcullis shut and armed on the far side of it. The only road out of Kent into London now ends, 1 street from your yard, in a cliff edge over the Thames. And Suffolk understands, in that one sight, its whole place in the world's order. The thing the borough has always known and mostly manages not to think about. The city can seal itself. You are the outside. The works at the south end of the bridge, the old fort the name remembers, that is this street, these yards, Joan and Osborne and Agnes and Nan and you. And whatever comes up the Dover Road will arrive here, and stop here, and be quartered here, among the prisons and the wash-houses and the poor, while London watches from behind its stone. Now we'll see, Agnes says at the gate that evening, arms crossed, watching the light die over the broken bridge. Kent at one end of the street and the Tower's guns at the other, and us between, hanging out washing. A breath through her nose that in another woman would be a laugh, as it was in the beginning. The 3rd of February is a Saturday, iron grey, the kites wheeling high over the river all morning as if they know something, and they do. He comes in the early afternoon. You are, of course, working. You're rinsing collars in water that smokes with cold, and the first you know of the ending of the world is that the street noise stops. Long Southwark is never silent, never once in 3 years, and now, from beyond the yard wall, silence comes up the street like a tide, shop front by shop front, shutter by shutter, and under the new silence one sound growing. Feet. Thousands of feet out of step, and hooves and cartwheels, and the queer creaking jingle of armed men, which once heard is never mistaken for anything else. Agnes bars the yard gate. It is a plank gate in a plank fence, and would stop a determined goat, and she bars it. And the four of you, Joan too, she comes over the fence stile with her apron still flowered, stand in the middle of the yard among the frozen washing and listen to an army arrive in your street. Sir Thomas Wyatt of Allington enters Southwark at 3 of the clock with the truth, when it's finally counted, not 30,000, but perhaps 3,000 or 4,000 men, and takes possession of the borough without one blow struck, because there is no one to strike him. The Queen's forces are all across the water behind the walls, and the borough's own men are prudently indoors, and the bridge is a cliff. You watch through the gap where the gate's top plank has warped, taking turns without a word about the taking of turns all afternoon, because not looking is beyond human strength. And here is what you see, and it is not what the ballads will say, on either side. You see tired men, meary to the thighs, days on winter roads, footsore, ordinary. Smiths and clothiers and husbandmen with pikes, and here and there the white coat of a turned London band. Boys younger than Nan with bills too big for them. A face you know, Ellen, you actually know. A fuller's son from the Maidstone Tenter grounds, grown into a man since you saw him last, marching past your gate with a rusty sallet on his head, and his eyes fixed on nothing, and you stand with your knuckle pressed against your teeth and do not call out, and that not calling is a stone you will carry a long while. They do not sack the borough, say that plainly, for it was not what anyone braced for. Wyatt hangs one of his own men on the second day for plundering, and his captains cry it up and down the street that no man is to take so much as a hen's egg unpaid, because he needs London's love, and London is watching from the far bank to see what Kent does with a street full of the poor. What they do is quarter. Every inn is full of them. The Christopher to the eaves, Osborne moving through his own house like a man carrying hot coals, saying nothing, counting everything. They knock at yards for bread, for beer, for washing, and they pay, some in good coin, some in promises, and Joan sells her whole cellar in 2 days, and Agnes, after standing one long minute in thought, takes in soldiers' shirts, because we wash, we do not ask. Their money is the realm's usual mongrel mess, and worse for the times. Worn testons of the bad old issues, cried down to sixpence, clipped pennies, more copper than silver. Red blushing shillings men tilt to the light and bite. The baker at the bridge foot, besieged at his hatch by a queue of armed strangers, stops taking the worst of it altogether, whatever the law says, because law is across the water just now. It is Tuesday, the 6th of February, when your worst day comes, the one your mother sewed a penny against 14 years ago in a bed in Maidstone. Flour gone, peas gone, the household small coin spent or refused, 40 soldiers' shirts washed and dried, and the promised payment a captain's word somewhere up the street. Nan white-faced with a hunger she won't name because she's proud, and the baker's hatch mobbed. You go up to your loft, and you take your shears, and you unpick your mother's waxed thread, and the penny of old King Harry VII drops into your palm, small, heavy, white, honest, warm from 3 years against your own hip. The baker weighs it on his finger, This fine old coin among the rebel dross looks at you, a washerwoman he has known by sight for 3 years, and puts 2 full loaves and a halfpenny back into your hands, and says quietly under the noise of the queue, "Good silver's good silver, mistress, whoever's queen." You feed Nan and Agnes, and you carry the heel of the second loaf across the stile to Joan, and that night, chewing slowly in the rushlight, you understand your mother completely. 14 years too late to tell her. Against the worst day, not treasure, ballast. She had stood in a street like this one, some year of some other trouble that never got into any chronicle, and she had known. There always comes one day when the world's money is lies, and one small heavy truth in a hem will carry a family over it. The worst day, it turns out, lasts 3 days, and then ends with drums before dawn. The drums come out of the dark from up towards St. George's Church, flat and urgent, rattling off the house fronts, and under them, filling in around them, the sound of an army getting to its feet in the cold. Harness, hooves, 1,000 men coughing, sergeants keeping their voices low and failing. You lie still on the pallet with Nan's fingers dug into your arm, both of you awake on the instant, neither of you speaking, and you listen to Kent leave your street. Because that is what is happening, and by morning the whole borough will know why. For those 3 days, while you were spending your mother's penny, the lieutenant of the tower had been busy across the water. Men who stood at the wharf side saw it plainly. Gunners moving on the white tower, tackle swinging, and one by one the great pieces hauled about until their black mouths looked south, at Southwark, not at Wyatt in particular, because a cannon is not a pointing finger, at the borough entire, at the inns and the yards and the church and every pallet in every loft, because iron shot does not pick rebels out of washerwomen, and everyone on this bank could do that sum, and did it in one cold afternoon. What happened next is told at the trough for years, so you have it the way you have most history, at second hand from women who had it from men who swear they stood close enough to touch it. The folk of the borough went to Wyatt, where he lay at the inns, innkeepers and watermen and wives together, and told him what was aimed at their roofs, and asked him plainly to go. And he stood in the street with his cap in his hand, they say, and said he would not have one house harmed for his sake, nor one soul the poorer. Say what you like of rebels, that was courteously done, and Southwark, which forgets nothing, remembered it long after the government preferred everyone forget. And so, drums before dawn, and the army goes westward, upriver, along the causeway through St. George's Fields while the sky is still black. Torches strung out like a procession of sparks until the sound of them sinks into the ordinary noises of water and wind, and then there is nothing. You go down at first light, all of you, and stand in the gateway, and Long Southwark lies empty. You've never seen it empty. 3 years, and the street has never once been still, and now it stretches from the bridge foot to St. George's with not a living soul in it, strewn with the leavings of an army, dead fires against the walls, trampled straw, a single shoe, a broken pike shaft, dung, the smell of cold ash and horse, and men gone. A dog trots down the middle of the roadway, tail up, delighted, king of the borough. Somewhere a shutter opens, then another. The street stands there like a held breath being slowly let out. Osborne is in his own inn-yard, bald head bare to the cold, turning in a circle, counting what an army leaves, which is nothing, and what it takes, which is everything loose. The captain's word for the 40 shirts, it hardly needs saying, is never made good. A captain's word, it turns out, weighs exactly what it weighs, Agnes rules a line under it in her reckoning book that evening, 8 shillings owing gone to smoke in the same voice she uses for weather. We'll wash it back, she says. A shirt at a time, that's how everything in this house was got. A shirt at a time. They have gone to Kingston, the river says, 10 miles up, where the bridge was broken like this one, and mended in the night with barges and planks. And the day after, in the middle of the morning, with your arms in the trough, you hear the battle, not as battle, as weather. A soft, grumbling wrongness in the air off the water, far to the west, like a fair day crowd heard through a wall. And then all the bells on the far bank begin, not in any order, clashing backward over each other, which is the grammar of alarm, and the whole borough comes out and stands in its yards looking north over the roofs. You stand with a wrung smock dripping ice water down your apron, Nan pressed against your shoulder, Joan on the stile, Agnes in the gateway, listening to a thing you cannot see, cannot help, cannot hinder, which will decide the price of bread and the safety of your sister and the name of God in your parish church. And after a while, because the trough is going cold, you go back to washing. We wash, we do not ask. Whether that is the wisdom of the poor or their whole tragedy, you honestly cannot tell, and it does not matter, because the smock will not ring itself. By candle time the word is across the river by shout and boat. It is done, and done almost without blood. They will tell it in pieces for weeks, fighting at the Charing Cross, hot and short. Wyatt come all the way down to Ludgate itself, and the gate shut in his face, and the men who had promised to rise for him inside the walls never rising. And at the last, penned by Temple Bar, soaked through, spent, he sat himself down on a bench, they say, like a carrier at the end of a bad road, and gave up his sword quietly, asking only that his people be spared. 50 dead in all, they say, out of 2 armies. The strangest ending to the loudest month of your life. Not a storm breaking, but a wave that ran all the way up the beach, paused at the sea-wall, and slid back down into the dark. The relief lasts about a day and a half. Then the borough discovers what comes after a rebellion fails, which is not peace, it is prisons. And Southwark, you will remember, is where the prisons live. Within the week the Marshalsea and the King's Bench and the White Lion and the Compter are stuffed like Michaelmas geese, and the men stuffed into them are Kentishmen, hundreds of them, the ones who marched past your gate in January. And now the voices calling down from the grates for bread, for God's love, for news, call it in the vowels of your own country. You walk past on the Tuesday with the church basket, and you go home savage with everyone all evening, until Agnes, who misses nothing, puts a heel of loaf and an end of bacon rind into a cloth without one word, and jerks her chin at the door. And after that, twice a week through Lent, when the poor boxman from St. Saviour's makes his round of the grates, you and Nan carry the second basket. Alms bread, parish bread, a crumb against a famine of trouble, and the hands that come through the bars for it are young men's hands with farm work still written on them. And you do not tell Nan that you look for one particular face at those windows, and do not find it, and cannot decide, night after night, whether that is mercy or the other thing. Because the hangings begin before February is out. Gallows go up all over the far bank, at every gate of the city, they say, and on this bank too, one at the bridge foot and one by St. George's, new yellow timber among the old grey houses, and on a Thursday morning men are hanged on them, and left as the law leaves them for a lesson. You are spared describing it because you were spared seeing it. Agnes that morning discovers urgent work at the far end of the yard for everyone, wet linen to turn, a copper to scour, and keeps the pair of you at it, inside the fence. until the street noise tells her it is over, and you scour the copper with your eyes stinging, more grateful to her than you have been to anyone since your mother died. The borough does not gather to gawp that day. It remembers a man with his cap off saying he would not have one house harmed, and keeps its doors shut and washes. And on the 12th of February on Tower Hill and inside the tower walls, the axe comes down twice, and the 9 days queen, who reigned while you queued for water and was locked up before your buckwash was dry, is dead in the 17th year of her age, and her young husband before her. She had never done anything in her life, the river says, except obey her elders. Whatever the rights of it, and you are a washerwoman, not a judge, one fact of it gets into you like river cold and never quite leaves. She was little more than a year older than Nan. You take that thought to the trough and drown it, because you must. But the yard is very quiet that day, and at supper Nan's head comes to rest on your shoulder, 15 years old and warm and alive and full of half a loaf, and over her hair you and Agnes look at one another, and no one says anything at all because there is nothing to be said that the rushlight and the 4 walls and the peas pottage are not already saying. Then, on the 22nd of February, the road gives something back. The word comes over the water at midday, and it comes laughing, which after this month is a sound so strange the whole market turns toward it. At Whitehall that morning, the Queen has pardoned the poor men of Kent, not the captains, not the gentlemen, their reckoning is still to come, but the common sort, 400 of them and more, marched up 2 and 2 through the mud with halters knotted round their own necks, and made to kneel in the wet court below the gallery. And the Queen came to the window and looked down at them kneeling in the mire with their ropes on, and pardoned them, every man. And they came up off their knees shouting, "God save your grace," and threw their halters in the air, so that for a moment men say, "This sky over Whitehall was full of hanging rope going up instead of men going down." Whatever else that woman does in her reign, that morning she gave 400 Kentish mothers back their sons, and your borough, which had been feeding those sons through its prison bars, rings her name off the house fronts for it. And for 2 days afterward, the Dover Road runs backward. They come over the bridge in 1s and 2s and dozens, the pardoned men, down Long Southwark, southward, homeward, footsore in February mud, some still carrying their halters coiled over a shoulder, because a good rope is a good rope, and a Kentishman wastes nothing, and the borough that watched them march up in January watches them walk home in February, and this time people do call out, and hand bread over gates, and nobody counts the cost too closely. You are at your own gate on the second morning, wringing out collars in the cold, when the fuller's son comes down the street. He is thinner. The rusty sallet is gone, and the pike is gone, and the man who marched past your gate with his eyes fixed on nothing is walking loose and slow, like someone relearning what his legs are for. You do not let him pass. That not calling in January has sat on your chest for 7 weeks, a stone with his face on it, and you're not carrying it 1 street further. You call his father's trade and the name of the Tentergrounds, and he stops as if struck and turns and looks at you for a long moment over the gate. "Marsh," he says at last, wondering. "Tenter Ellen, off the Maidstone carrier." He shakes his head slowly. "You had a little sister, all elbows. Still have. The elbows are bigger. You give him what there is, the morning's small beer warmed at the fire, bread, an end of cheese, Nan staring at him from the copper like a cat at a stranger. He eats, standing up in the gateway, the way your kind eats everything, and tells you in a flat, tired voice the shape of it from the inside. Rochester, and the whitecoats coming over shouting they were all Englishmen. Kingston Bridge mended in the dark, his own hands on the planks. The London gates shut and the promises come to nothing. Then the prisons and the mud at Whitehall, and the rope on his neck, and the Queen at the window like a small dark figure in a picture, and the roar when they understood they would live. The halter I kept, he says, and touches the coil on his shoulder, and his mouth makes something that is not quite a smile. It'll tie hurdles, and when my children ask, I'll have the answer by me. He will not take the halfpenny. Yeah, you try. The baker's halfpenny, the change of your mother's penny, kept these 3 weeks in the needle box. He closes your fingers back over it with one cracked hand and says, Kent feeds its own going home, and God keep you, Ellen Marsh, and your sister's elbows. And he shoulders his rope and goes, down Long Suffolk, past the prisons that held him, one small figure on the oldest road in England, going home to tell a story that will be told over Maidstone fires for 50 years. You watch him out of sight. The stone you have carried since January goes with him, quietly, the way stones go, and the halfpenny stays in the needle box, and it will buy, though you do not know it yet, something red, before the year is done. In March the carpenters come to the bridge, and the gap where the drawbridge was is planked and railed, and the carts roll over it again, and the borough's blood moves properly for the first time since Candlemas. Prices come down off their fright, not all the way. Prices never come all the way back, but enough that the Saturday market sounds like itself. Eggs crying, fish crying, the whole rough choir of it. The gallows stand empty now, and everyone walks past them the way you walk past the heads, which is to say without seeing them at all. And a thing the whole borough refuses to see is very nearly not there. But money is short in Agnes's house, shorter than it has been since you came. The rebellion ate the winter's fat, the unpaid shirts, the doubled prices, the pantry run down to boards. And the crane's basket is Owen, city-side, with the bridge gate still thick with watchmen who turn out baskets and question accents, and yours is a Kentish accent, in the very month when Kentish vowels are being questioned up against walls. Agnes gives you her word to cross at last, and then stands in the yard gnawing her lip over the boat penny, actually gnawing, Agnes, over a penny. And that is when you go up the ladder and come down with the needle box open in your hand. I'd call a notch due Tom. He's at the ovary stairs, bailing out the wherry with a wooden scoop, and he straightens up slowly and looks at the half-tally lying on your palm. 3 winters old, 3 notches scored across the split, and something goes over his face like wind over water. You would swear, if you did not know better, that the old man is pleased, not at the debt, at being asked. A kindness owed and never called begins, after enough years, to feel like a kindness doubted. Wondered if you thought my wood was rotten, he says. He takes out his own half from wherever it lives inside that salt-stiff coat, and fits the 2 together on the thwart, notch against notch, grain against grain, the way tallies have been proved in this country since before Domesday. 2 halves of one truth that cannot be counterfeited because they were once one stick. Then he draws his knife and pares the first notch away, one clean curl of wood that drops into the bilge, and hands you back your half smooth at the top. A notch is over and home again, mind. My stick, my law. 2 left. God send you never need them. He puts you across the flood to the old Swan with the basket riding in the bows, waits at the stairs the length of your errand, and brings you home on the turning tide, and takes not 1 farthing, and talks the whole way about anything but the winter, the first shad running, the kites nesting again in the bridge timbers, a sturgeon somebody swears was seen at Barn Elms, which Tom does not believe, because he's been hearing about that same sturgeon, he says, since the old king was a boy. At the Cranes, the kitchen door stands open to the spring, and there is a new sound in that tall house, riding down the stairwell over the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat. A baby, exercising its lungs with the single-mindedness of its kind. The child came at All Hallows Tide, in the middle of everything a daughter, and the cookmaid reports with relish that the master, who wanted nothing in this world but a son to put into the drapers after him, took one look into the cradle and was conquered entire. Mistress Crane receives the linen herself as ever in the parlour doorway, and she is changed, still gowned to buy the yard twice over, but the taut frown has lost its conviction, and part-way through the counting the nurse brings the child down, and the young mistress takes her onto her shoulder with the linen only half checked, which a year ago would have been as likely as the Thames running upstream. "You kept our wash through all of it," she says suddenly, over the small-capped head. "The troubles, not a sheet lost." It is half a question. She wants to know what it was like on the wrong bank, this girl who watched an army's torches from a glazed window across the water. "We washed, madam," you say. "We didn't ask." And Master Crane, who has come quietly into the passage behind you with his ledger under his arm, makes a short sound in his chest that in a lesser man would be a laugh, and says, "Would God my whole company had done likewise," and then does the thing you will carry home like a full basket. He pays the quarter. Not the month, the quarter, in advance, 9 shillings counted onto the kitchen table in good coin, old coin, fine metal that rings true, because a man who trades cloth to Antwerp keeps 2 purses and knows exactly which one he is opening and for whom. "Hard weather for small houses," he says, weighing you with those slow grey eyes, the way he weighed you over the ring a year ago. Fletcher's kept its hands clean through it, in every sense. My wife's linen goes nowhere else while I live, and the child's with it. Tell your mistress. And among the 9 shillings, when you sort them by rushlight that evening, there is one small heavy penny with the face of old King Harry VII on it, fine metal from before the money went bad, and you take it up and hold it, and Agnes watches you hold it, and neither of you says one word about hems or mothers or winters to come. You put it in the needle box next to the halfpenny and the tally with its 2 notches. Not treasure, ballast. You know its trade now. The taking year has one more taking in it before spring lets go. On Palm Sunday, the 18th of March, the parishes carry palms again for the first time in years. Willow standing in for palm as it always has in this country of no palm trees, and the order goes out that every soul in London is to be at church that morning and keep there, and it is while the whole city is on its knees that a barge comes down the river from Westminster, with the Lady Elizabeth in it, the old king's younger daughter, 21, under guard, bound for the Tower. Tom Hazard gives it to you at the stairs on the Tuesday, in a voice pitched under the gull noise. How the barge shot the bridge with that freight aboard, the water so fierce at the starlings that the rowers hung back and were made to go on. How she went in by the water gate where the traitors go in, and would not have it that she was won, and said so on the stairs in the rain. Watermen polish a tale like the river polishes glass, but the shape of it is true. The wheel is turned again, and this time it is the red-haired daughter locked inside the walls her mother died in, while the elder daughter wears the crown. You think of Nan at the yard gate saying, "One day I'll stand on the near side of a thing," and you think not for the first time that the far side has its mercies. "Still a taking year then," you say to Tom. He looks at the brown water a while, the tide going over the drowned steps, the bridge roaring softly at its arches the way it does at every turning tide. "River doesn't count years the way the church does," he says at last. It takes till it's done, then it gives. You'll see. I've watched this water 50 year, and it's never once kept everything it took. In April they behead Wyatt on Tower Hill. The head is set up afterward on a gibbet away west past Westminster, and within the month somebody steals it clean away by night, and the government cries reward and never sees it again, and all up and down the bank that spring men buy each other ale and say nothing with enormous satisfaction. There are new heads on the bridge gate too that season. You don't look up. Every stranger looks up. That's how you know a stranger. And it is truer than ever now that some of the faces up there were last seen alive marching past your own gate. The pigeons sit on them, because pigeons have no sense of ceremony at all, and the swifts come screaming back around the Tower of St. Saviour's the first week of May, exactly as they came last year and will come next year, and the year the last person who remembers any of this is dead. And it is under that tower, in the green middle of May, that you're given the thing you will keep longest of anything in this story. It is a Tuesday. You've brought the church's clean linen and are counting it into the vestry press with Sir John, when he shuts the press door, takes up his stick, looks at you with those wet, red-rimmed, cheerful eyes, and says, "Leave the basket, mistress. I am minded to see my parish, and I am too old to climb alone, and you have earned a long view. Come up." The tower stair of St. Saviour's is a turning stone gut, 200 steps and more, worn hollow by 400 years of sextons and ringers, so narrow your shoulders brush both walls, so dark between the loopholes that you climb by feel, one hand on the cold newel, the old man's breath above you loud and slow and stubborn, his stick tapping each step. Twice you stop for him. Twice he says, "I am gathering my thoughts," with dignity, and you both pretend that is what is happening. You pass the ringing chamber, the ropes hanging still, their woolly grips worn shiny. You pass the bells themselves, great dark shapes shouldered in their timber cage, smelling of tallow and cold bronze, silent in a way that feels like held speech, and Sir John touches the rim of the biggest in passing, the way you would touch a beast you trusted. And then a small door, daylight like a blow, and the wind, and the roof, and there it is, the whole of your world at one look. You have never in your life been higher than a first-floor loft. No one you know has. And now Suffolk lies below you entire, flat and small and impossibly knowable, like a counterpane on God's own bed. The long brown stripe of the High Street running south from the bridge foot, the inn-yards opening off it one after another, their galleries like little wooden combs, the wash-house yards behind, your own among them, and in your own yard, small as a beetle, a figure that must be Nan moving between the drying poles, hanging out smocks you scrubbed this morning. The 5 prisons from up here are only roofs among roofs. You could cover the Marshalsea with your thumb. The bearings stand at the western end like 2 baskets left out in the grass. Winchester Palace shows its great rose window sidelong, a wheel of stone lace with the light through it. And the river, the lord of it all, lies bent through the middle of everything, brown gold in the sun, crowded with wherries small as water beetles, and the bridge stands across it on its 19 feet, with the water piling white at every arch, and you can see from up here the pale patch of new timber where the drawbridge was cut and planked like the clean scar on a healed arm, and across the water, London. You've lived 3 years in the sound of it and never once seen it whole, 100 steeples rising out of a lake of red roofs and smoke, and over them all Paul's, enormous, its great spire standing into the sky like a spear set on end. the tallest thing, men say, in all Christendom. Wharves and cranes along the whole waterfront, ships at anchor below the bridge, their masts are leafless winter wood, and downriver the tower, white and square and quiet, keeping what it keeps. And south, when you turn, wind in your face, the roofs give out into gardens, and the gardens into fields, and the fields run away green and smoke blue into the hills of Surrey. And beyond those hills, out of sight but not out of knowing, the road runs down through the orchards to Maidstone, where 2 graves are, and a fence a girl talked over, and everything you were before you were this. Now, says Sir John, holding his cap on with one shaking hand, look again, mistress, and tell me what you see most of. You look again, and once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. Washing, everywhere, washing. In every yard on the bank, in every court off the high street, strung between poles, spread on hedges, laid white on the palace garths, on the far bank too, on rails and lines and bushes from Westminster, clear down to the Tower, linen drying in the May sun, hundreds upon hundreds of white flags flying over both cities at once, put there this morning by hands like yours, every single piece of it, and by no other means under heaven. Kings up the river, the old man says, nodding west toward Westminster. Money over the water, God's house under our feet, and every rag of it washed by somebody, fed by somebody, carried by somebody. The wind takes his words about. From down there, the great turn the world and the smaller turned by it. From up here, I have never once been able to tell which is which. 500,000 souls, and you 1 pair of hands among them. But look what hands do. He is quiet a moment, holding his cap. The bells and the washing, mistress. 60 year I've served this church under 5 crowned heads, and every one of them ordered something changed, and much was changed. And every morning of all those years, without one order given, the bells rang and the washing went up white, and that, I have come to think, is the half of the kingdom that holds while the other half thrashes. Nobody has ever once had to command it. He looks a long time at the hills of Surrey, an old man gathering his thoughts at the top of his last tower. They will not put it in the Chronicles, he says. The Chronicles are spoken for. But God keeps other books, and I think your kind fills most of the pages. Now help me down. Going up, an old fool can manage. Coming down is where pride breaks its neck. You go down the dark stair slowly, his hand a small weight on your shoulder the whole way, and come out blinking into the churchyard, and you walk home along the bank with your basket, past the palace and the prisons and the gallows nobody sees, and everything is exactly as it was an hour ago, and nothing is, because you have seen the counterpane now, and the white flags flying over both cities, and you know which army they belong to. After the Tower, something shifts, not dramatically, not in any way you could point to and say, there, that is when it changed. But the weeks take on the deep, worn grooves of the second summer after a fright, when a place has remembered how to be ordinary and is quietly grateful for it. Water, fire, lie, pour, scrub, wring, hang, smooth, mend, spin, fetch, carry, wait, reckon, walk, talk, feed, bank the fire, sleep, the buckwash each fortnight, the church linen Tuesdays, the crane's basket over the bridge, and now the crane baby's linen with it, tiny smocks and clouts and biggins by the dozen, which Nan washes and wrings with an absorbed tenderness she would deny, with violence if you named it. At midsummer, Agnes raises you to 12pence, states it flatly across the trough, and dares you with one look to make anything of it, and you make nothing of it aloud, and the two of you scrub on in a silence with a completely different weight than the silence of last year. And in July the smoothing comes to you in earnest, and it comes the hard way. It is 3 years that month since Roger Fletcher died. 3 years since the sweat went through this bank like a wind through standing barley, taking a man at dinner who had been well at breakfast. And whether it is that anniversary sitting on her, or the wet heat off the river, or a lifetime of full buckets finally presenting their bill, an ague takes Agnes in the second week of July and shakes her the way the winter shook Tom Hazard. For 8 days she cannot stand over a trough. She lies in her narrow bed off the kitchen, burning and freezing turnabout, furious at her own body as at a bad apprentice, issuing orders through the doorway in a voice that starts the week like a drayman and ends it like a dry leaf. And you and Nan carry the yard between you, and Joan comes over the stile so often she wears a new path in her own garden. And the crane's basket comes due. Sheets, shirts, the mistress's fine smocks, the child's things, all washed, all dried, and wanting the slicking, the polish, the finish that is the yard's whole name over the water, and Agnes's hands on the coverlet cannot hold a spoon steady, let alone drive 8 ounces of Flanders glass in small circles for a morning. You stand in her doorway with the folded wash in your arms, and you do not ask, because you cannot make your mouth do it. She looks at you a long time from the pillow, her face all bones and will, and what passes over it is not doubt. It is farewell to something. You only understand that later. Then she says, "The box is on the shelf. Wipe your hands till they squeak first. It goes nowhere out of this house, and it goes back in the wool before dark." And that is how, on a July morning in the year 1554, with the swift screaming round the tower, and your sister keeping the yard gate like a halberdier, you unwrap the lambswool clout and take Roger Fletcher's slick stone into your hand for the first time. It is heavier than it looks, and colder, and then, quickly, warmer, the way glass is. The knob is worn to the shape of a dead man's grip, and your fingers settle into the very hollows his fingers wore. You spread the first shirt on the board, breathe out, lean from the shoulder the way you have watched her lean 100 times, and begin. Small circles, her voice from the bed, through the doorway, pared down to a thread but not one grain less certain. Lean from the shoulder, not the wrist. The wrist lies, and humble your hand, girl. The stone does the work if you're humble enough to let it. The stone does the work. You feel it happen, somewhere in the second shirt. The moment your hand stops commanding and starts listening, and the linen begins to change under the glass, the weave closing, the surface coming up smooth and faintly shining, like ice on a pond, like a thing not made but revealed, and the smell of clean warm cloth rises off the board, and the circles find a rhythm that is nobody's rhythm, not yours, not hers, the rhythm of the work itself, going round and round like bells, like tides, like years. You do the whole basket. It takes the morning. When it is done, your shoulder is one long ache, and your hand will not quite open, and you carry the smoothed pile to her bed for judgment, and Agnes Fletcher takes the top shirt and holds it up to the window light with both shaking hands, and is silent for longer than you have ever known her silent. "He'd have said that will serve," she says at last, which, from her translated out of the language of this yard, is a coronation. She sleeps most of that afternoon, the first true sleep of the week, with the shirt still on the coverlet, and by the month's end she's up and at the trough and twice as tyrannical, and nothing is said. But from that week the black stone comes out of the wool for your hand as well as hers, and every soul on the bank knows within a fortnight, because everything is known within a fortnight, that Fletcher's has a second pair of finishing hands now, and that the widow chose them herself. That same month, on St. James's Day, the 25th of July, far off down in Winchester, the Queen is married. The Prince of Spain came ashore at Southampton in a pouring rain, the carriers say. Rain the whole week, rain on the wedding too. And the Kentish men in the inn yard say the sky is of the same mind as Kent, and nobody reports them for it now. The summer has grown that much easier. You hear the marriage the way you heard the coronation, as bells across the water, and the yard stops to listen a moment, and Joan says, "Well, she's wed," in the voice of a woman declining to start a quarrel with the weather, and the wash goes on. But London is to see the pair of them brought in state, in August, and here the story bends round at last to your own street, because the Crown has determined the entry shall be made the old way, the great way, over the bridge, and there is only one place you can be the night before a king goes over London Bridge, and that is Southwark, your Southwark. For one night in August, the whole gorgeous machinery of 2 crowns parks itself in the borough of prisons and wash-houses. Spanish lords in black velvet sitting their horses like statues of themselves. English lords in every colour cloth can be made to hold. Carts of plate and hangings, and the King and Queen of England lie that night at Suffolk Place, the great turreted house down the High Street past St. George's, so that Nan, standing on the woodpile in the dusk, can look down your own ordinary street and see, burning above the rooftops southward, the windows of the house where the Queen of England is at supper, half a mile from her own pallet. The borough has scrubbed itself for a week like a bride. The street is fresh, gravelled. The gallows, and mark this because the borough marked it, are taken down at last, cleared clean away against the king's coming, because whatever a government thinks its subjects should see, it knows precisely what a new king had better not. The house fronts are hung with painted cloths and green boughs, the bridge houses with arras end to end, and at the drawbridge stand 2 painted giants, taller than houses, Coroneus and Gogmagog of the old London legend, holding up verses of welcome between them. The inns are packed to the eaves at triple rates. Every yard on the High Street is boiling linen at panic prices, and Agnes, working you all 4 like a captain in a sea fight, Joan hired in for the week, observes over the copper that kings come and kings go, but they all sweat into somebody's washing. Gentlemen on great occasions, it is confirmed for the second time in this story, sweat like carters. You boil it. And 2 nights before, an August storm nearly sinks the whole enterprise. It comes up the river at midnight, white lightning and a wind that walks round the yard like a thief trying doors, and a gutter above the lean-to, choked with summer's moss, bursts its seam, and sends a sheet of roof water straight through the boards and into the ash store, the whole common heap of it, soaked to grey porridge in an hour. Dead ash, grey water, grey linen, and 40 gentlemen's shirts promised white by Friday. Agnes stands over the ruin at dawn, and for once in her life says nothing at all, because there is nothing to say. Wet ash will not come dry in a day, and there is no fine ash to beg, borrow, or buy this week on either bank for love or money. You go up the ladder without a word and come down with a crock, bone dry, wooden lidded, half full and a little more, the finest oak ash in the borough, the Christopher's bread oven ash, sieved through cloth, begged hatful by hatful over 3 years, and hoarded against exactly this day, the way other women hoard against a dowry. You set it on the wash bench and take off the lid, and Agnes looks in at it a long moment, and then at you, and the storm-wrecked morning rearranges itself around that crock like a street around a preacher. I always said, she announces to the yard, to Joan, to the wet world in general, that a girl who hoards good ash will do. She never said it. She thought it 3 years running, and you knew she thought it, and she knows you knew. And this is how, among your kind, love is finally spoken aloud, as a lie about ash over a wash bench at 6 in the morning. The buck is laid with your ash, and the lie runs gold clear, and the shirts come up white as the Queen's own table linen, delivered Friday to the hour, and the crock goes back up the ladder 1/3 full, already filling again by Michaelmas. Because the lesson of the crock is not that you spent it, it is that you had it. The entry itself is a Saturday, the 18th of August, and Nan stands on the near side of it. You are all four at your own street's edge by mid-morning, wedged against Osborne's wall with half the borough, and when I say the street was full, I need you to understand what that means when the street is 12 feet of gravel, and the whole of 2 Kingdoms' curiosity is trying to stand in it. The crowd is packed shoulder-blade to breastbone from St. George's to the bridge foot. Children on every Pentasy roof, faces in every window, and the noise is not shouting, not yet, but the sea sound of thousands of people breathing and shifting in one narrow channel, waiting. Then the trumpets, far down by Suffolk Place, and the sound comes up the street ahead of the procession like a bow wave, and the crowd's murmur climbs on top of it, and here they come. Halberdiers first, then heralds stiff with gold thread, then lords, English and Spanish paired 2 and 2 on horseback, velvet enough to curtain the sky, and horses whose harness is worth more than every building in your yard. And then, riding side by side under a canopy, borne by 6 men on foot, so close past Osborne's wall that you could count the pearls on a sleeve, them. The Queen on the near side, a small woman, past her first youth, in cloth of gold, sitting her horse stiffly, her face tired and open and working, because she keeps looking at the crowds, at the actual faces, the way monarchs are not supposed to, as if she still cannot believe they came. On the far side, the prince her husband, Philip of Spain, trim-bearded in white and silver, bowing his head left and right with the exact measured courtesy of a man trained to it, since the cradle, and feeling nothing whatever about it. 10 feet, perhaps 12, at a walk. Not half a heartbeat at half a mile this time. The near side, the close side, the Counting Pearls side, and then gone, up toward the bridge where the giants wait, and the crowd folds in behind like water behind a wherry, roaring now, and the great machine of the day grinds gorgeously north over the river, and the cheering follows it away into the city, conduits running wine again over there, until in Suffolk it is afternoon, and hot, and the trampled gravel is scattered with wilting green boughs, and somebody's dropped glove is being tried on by a dog. Nan has not said one word in an hour. She climbs down off the mounting block she conquered at dawn, and she looks up the emptied street after the vanished world, and then at you, and what she says, 15 years old, is, "Her face is ordinary, like Joan's when the brewings turned out right after all." A long pause, the crowd flowing round you both. All that gold, and an ordinary face inside it, and then quietly, trying it on her tongue like a coin she had bitten and found good. "I stood on the near side of a thing." "You did," you say, and you do not say the rest of what you think. that the thing came to your street because it needed your street to walk on, and then it went over the bridge and you stayed. Near is not in. Near is what your kind is given. But watching your sister walk home swinging the empty nut basket she sold, clean out by noon, 3 shillings and 4pence in her apron, singing the trumpets under her breath, you find that near, on a bright day with money in the apron, is not nothing either. Autumn comes in gentle for once. The harvest of this year is a good one, the first properly good one in 4 or 5, and in October you stand in the yard while Nan hands you the market bread, and your palm does its old arithmetic before your head has even asked it to, and stops and weighs again. Heavier. The penny loaf is heavier. For the first time since you came over the bridge with everything you owned in one bundle, the arithmetic has gone the right way, and you stand there holding a halfpenny worth of good news that no proclamation ever cried, feeling it the way the fine folk must feel a treaty. Bread is the poor woman's chronicle. This entry reads, "The year mended." At Martimas Nan turns 16, and Agnes raises her to 8pence without being asked. And the child who cried a week off the Maidstone cart now runs the small washes start to finish, keeps the tally of the church linen in her own head to the last clout, and bargains with the Christopher's new underbaker for oven ash so pitilessly that you've had to walk away from the fence to laugh. The crock is her charge now, by your own gift, lid, hoard, and doctrine, and she keeps it drier than a sermon. In the last week of November, the wheel of the world gives its year's final turn, and you see a piece of it with your own eyes. A barge coming up the river on the flood, hung with banners, and upright in the bow a great cross of silver, catching the low winter sun so that the whole reach of the water seems to run toward it. It is the cardinal pole, the exile, come home after 20 years, borne up the Thames to Westminster past both banks standing quiet to watch. And on St. Andrew's Day, the 30th of November, in the Parliament House over the water, the whole realm of England, lords and commons kneeling, is absolved and received back into the old faith, and the bells once more say so. You stand in the yard among the frozen washing, and listen to the city ring the third great change of your 3 years in it, and Agnes comes out and stands beside you, wiping her hands, listening with the face of a woman hearing a tune she was young to, and all she says is, "Mind you keep the frontal mended," which is Agnes for everything else there is to say. There are other bells that season too, softer ones, Te Deums sung in the churches, because the word is given out from the court that the Queen is with child. And ere to England and Spain together come summer, in the streets they drink to it. At the trough the wives keep their own counsel, tallying dates and signs in the oldest arithmetic there is, and saying aloud only, "God send her grace a good hour." Sir John, counting surplices with you in the vestry that Tuesday, his hands steady on the cloth as they are steady on nothing else, is quiet a long while, and then says, "I have sung the Te Deum for such tidings 5 times in my life, mistress, under 3 crowns, and I have learned to sing it and to keep my hoping small both at once. It is a useful trick. Old men and poor women know it. Kings never learn it." He folds the last surplice, pat, pat, with his spotted hands. "Good weather for keeping things, father," you say, and the old man looks up at you sharply and then laughs, honestly laughs, a small dry sound like a page turning, at his own words come back to him on your tongue, and says that when a washerwoman quotes a priest's sermon back to him, the parish is either in very good order or past all praying for, and he declines to determine which. Christmas that second winter is quieter than the last and better. Goose again from Osborne, who this year sells it to Joan at half the market and calls it a consideration for a valued neighbour, which is Osborne for sentiment. His inn has had its best autumn in a decade, and a bald man counting full stables can afford a goose. Joan's beer, the word ale has quietly retired from the conversation, goes to the Christopher and the Tabard both by standing order now, her second copper paid off at Michaelmas, and her son comes up from Queenhithe for the 12 days with a bargeman's wages in his purse and his mother's chin on his face, and eats, by Agnes's count which she conducts aloud, an entire flitch of bacon between his arrival and Childermas. Tom Hazard hauls no fares Christmas week. The river's last kindness of the year, he says, is to freeze hard enough at the edges that a man can plead ice with honour. He comes to the yard instead, Christmas Eve, with a salted shad, and sits by the kitchen fire being fed and contradicting Joan with enormous contentment. And when he leaves, he pauses at the gate and tells the frosty air, to no one in particular, that it has turned out a giving year after all, and he had said it would, and every one present has the charity to let that stand, and on 12th night, by the light of Agnes's one yearly wax candle, you give Nan the petticoat. You bought the cloth at Michaelmas with a year of spindle money, the thread sold pound by pound through every season of this story, and the baker's halfpenny went in with it, the change of your mother's penny, spent at last on the one thing in this world it was always going to buy. And Joan's niece took your measure of Nan by stealth, at the bare garden fence giggling, and you have sewed it in the loft by rushlight, after her breathing changed every night through Advent. Good kersey, full thick against the river cold, dyed madder red, red as holly, red as the coals under the copper, redder, you have it on the sworn word of Joan's niece, than anything Moll Barker's cousin ever owned. Nan takes the parcel off her knees and unfolds it, and goes absolutely still, the way the market went still that July morning when the world changed. And then she puts her face into the red wool and howls like a 4-year-old, 16 years old, howling into a petticoat, and everyone talks very loudly about other things until she's fit to be seen, and she wears it to church at Epiphany with such duchess-like gravity, walking up Long Southwark, that Agnes has to invent a cough. What Nan does not find, because you sewed it deep and flat the way your mother taught your fingers without ever once showing them, is what is in the hem. The old penny of the 7th Harry, Master Crane's good silver, fine metal from before the money went bad, folded into the red kersey at the seam and stitched over, 11 stitches to the inch, with waxed thread. You told her about it 3 days later, at the water stairs, in the grey of the morning queue, quietly, between one yoke and the next, what it is, and where it lies, and the words that come with it, which are the only inheritance your family has ever handed down, and are worth more than the coin, against the worst day, not to be touched for hunger, nor for rent, nor for red cloth, touched only when the world's money is lies, and the day has come, and you will know it when it comes. Nan is quiet a long moment, her breath standing in the cold air over the buckets. She does not say, "Thank you." She says, "Whose hand sewed yours?" And you tell her, and she nods once slowly, taking her place in a line of women she never met, and picks up the yoke, and the two of you carry the day's first water up from the river, the way you have carried it 1,000 mornings, small steps, full buckets, small steps, and that is all, and it is enough. The hem of your own kirtle has been empty since February. It does not feel empty any more. It feels answered. So the year closes, and the world, for once, seems to close with it, folded and smoothed and put away like a finished wash. Stand back from it a moment, the way you stood on the tower, and look at the counterpane. The Queen is wed, and carrying, so all England believes, the heir of two empires. The realm is back in the old faith by Act of Parliament and peal of bells, and the mass your mother whispered is the law of the land again, and the frontal the parish wives worked lies on the altar at St. Saviour's for its second Christmas, mended where it wants mending by your own hand. The rebellion is a year-old story told by men who have begun already to improve their own parts in it. The gallows are down, the bridge is mended, the loaf is heavier. No army stands on any road in England, and in a washhouse yard off Long Suffolk, a woman of 27 sits by the banked fire of an evening with her hands for 1 hour still. You do not yet know, and be glad of it, that none of it will hold, that the child the bells sang for will never be born, not this summer nor ever, that within a year or two fires will burn at Smithfield, across the water, that will scorch that Queen's name for as long as England remembers anything, that the red-haired girl who went into the tower by water will come out again and outlive them all, and turn the whole wheel one more time, and that the old priest who showed you a city of white flags will not live to be ordered through it again. All of that is written on the far side of pages you will turn one at a time, at the pace of loaves, and Tuesdays the only pace there is. Tonight the ledger of the year stands balanced, and you are owed nothing, and you owe nothing that cannot be paid in washing, and no one in this house is hungry, and no one in this house is in prison, and no one in this house is dead. By the arithmetic of your kind, that is not a quiet year. That is a triumph. On quiet evenings now, when the yard is shut and the supper cleared and the others gone up, you sometimes sit a while on the stool by the kitchen window, where Agnes smooths, and watch the last light die over the fence, and let the whole cast of your day file past in the dark of your own eyes. Agnes, asleep beyond the wall, 55 this year, her empire of lie and linen safe another season, her black stone shared at last, because a craft kept in one hand dies in that hand, and she knows it, and chose you, and never once said so in words, and never needs to. Joan, over her own fence, sleeping the sleep of a woman whose cellar is full of beer that keeps, whose son is fed, whose 14 shillings of ruin has become a tale she tells at other women's troubles, to prove that troubles turn. Tom, salt-cured, indestructible, with your tally in his sea-chest, 2 notches yet to run, a currency of last resort better than silver, because silver does not row. Sir John, in his cold lodging by the church, sleeping under 60 years of overturned altars, with his hands folded, steady at last. Osborne counting even in his dreams, and not unkindly. The fuller's son, far down the dark road in Maidstone, a rope hung on a nail, turning into a fireside story. Mistress Crane in her chestnut parlour, listening for the nursery. The Queen of England up the river, listening, though you will never know it, for a heartbeat that is not coming. All the sleepers of both banks, high and low, laid out along the black river like linen along a hedge, waiting from morning to take them up again. And you. The girl off the Maidstone cart is still in you, 3 winters deep, the one who cried at the bells and flinched at the bridge and thought a city could be learned like a psalm. She is not gone. Nobody's younger self is ever gone. She's only folded away inside, the way the frontal lay folded in the coffer, kept safe through the worst of it, taken out now and then by a smell of orchard apples or a Kentish vowel in the market, looked at and folded away again. but she is not the one who carries the yoke now. The one who carries the yoke is a woman who has washed through a plague summer and a rebellion winter, who's been trusted with a dead man's stone and a live man's gold ring, who has spent her mother's penny rightly and sewn its brother into the next hem down the line, who can read a loaf like a lawyer and a bell like a bishop, and who is known, from the bridge foot to the bear garden, from the Christopher to the church, by her own name, honestly earned, Ellen Marsh, Fletcher's woman. It is a small name in a small borough on the wrong side of a river. It is also, weighed in the only scales you've ever trusted, fine metal, full weight, and it rings true. The work did that. Nobody will ever write it down, and the work did it all the same. And if some evening you could know that 4.5 centuries on, in rooms warm beyond your dreaming, strangers would lie in the dark listening to the shape of your days, your lie and your loaves and your river. Not the king's day, not the cardinal's yours. You would laugh the way Joan laughs, from the boots up, and say they must be very short of sermons over there. But they are not listening for a sermon. They are listening because they know your voice. It is the voice under all their own days too. It is the sound of somebody unregarded taking pains. And now the candle is out, and the ladder is climbed, and this story has one more thing to do, which is what every day in it was always pointing at. It is time to sleep. The loft is dark and smells of wet wool and old smoke, the same two smells that met you on the first morning of this story, and will meet you tomorrow and every morning after. The pallet knows your shape. Nan is warm along your back, 16 now, longer boned, but the same bony heat she was at 14, breathing slow through her mouth, one red hem folded carefully over the rail, where she can see it first thing, a coin asleep inside it that she will carry for 30 years and, God willing, never spend. The wool drips from the rafters, slow, patient, unhurried, a sound so woven into your nights that silence itself would wake you. Below, through the floorboards, the banked fire keeps its one red eye under the copper, held in ash till morning, warm heart of the sleeping house. Listen. The borough is going down into sleep around you, layer by layer, the way linen goes down into the buck. The last singing dies out of the Christopher's yard, cut off by a shutter, the same shutter as always. A watchman's staff knocks its slow patrol along Long Suffolk. Fainter, fainter. A dog answers another dog across the rooftops, settles it, and is still. The last cart is in, the last gate barred, the last rushlight pinched between finger and thumb somewhere behind the fences. And under it all, under everything, first sound and last sound, the river, going down its old road in the dark, taking the day's noise with it, giving and taking, taking and giving, like blood in your own ears, like breath. Your shoulders ache, the old honest ache of the yoke, no worse than yesterday. Your hands are cracked at the knuckles, and they are warm, and they are still at last, laid open on the blanket like tools set down. The day is paid, the fire is banked, the gate is barred, the linen is folded, the crock is dry, the sister is breathing. You are dry enough, warm enough, fed enough. You have a roof and a wage and a name that rings true, and that is more than most of the world that owns the world can say tonight with a whole heart. That's enough. It was always going to have to be enough, and here in the dark with the wool dripping its slow sermon, it simply finally is. Tomorrow there will be water to carry, 6 trips up from the stairs, the 3rd step greased with weed, small steps, full buckets, small steps. Tomorrow there will be a fire to wake and a buck to lay, and a queue to stand in and news to weigh. Tomorrow there will be bells. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow has always come, and it has never yet come before dawn. Right now there is only the pallet and the warmth at your back and the drip of the wool and the river. The same as last night. The same as the first night 3 winters ago, when you lay awake listening to a city you did not know. The same as all the nights stretching out ahead, down all the Tuesdays and Michaelmases and 12th nights of a working life, each one ending exactly here, in the dark, in the warm, done. Centuries will pass. The Southwark you know will change beyond recognition. The bridge, your bridge, will lose its houses and then its heads, and then stone by stone its very self, pulled down and built again, and again after that, until not one pier of the 19 stands in the water it strangled for 600 years. The prisons will fall, one after another, and be ploughed into streets and yards, and at the last into gardens where children play on grass over the Marshallses' bones. The bearings will go, and in their place, a lifetime after you, men will raise playhouses on your bank, a stone's throw from your drying poles, and words will be spoken on those stages to crowds standing in the same mud your crowd stood in, that the world will never afterward stop repeating. The washhouse yards will become warehouses, and the warehouses will become brick canyons roaring with engines, and those in their turn will become towers of glass taller than 10 of Paul's spires stacked end on end. But St. Saviour's will stand. Hold on to that as you go down. The church at the bridge foot, your church, the tower you climbed on a May morning with an old man gathering his thoughts, stands there still, this very night, called a cathedral now, its bells still rung, its stones the same stones, and at its feet, under the same tower, there is a market still, where the market cross stood, and people still queue there for bread, on the very gravel where Nan hefted the penny loaf. 4.5 centuries, and the 2 ends of your street that were true have stayed true, the bells and the bread. You could walk from one to the other today with your eyes shut. It's that close, that real. And the people have not changed at all. They will still rise in the dark, the ones who keep everything running. Still carry what must be carried, and count what a coin brings home, and wait at doors for people one rung up. Still spin something in the cracks of every day. Still keep the small things safe, the coin in the hem, the crock kept dry, the cloth folded away from the men with inventories, the kindness scored on a stick. Still wash, generation after generation, everything the world dirties, and hang it out white and take it in, and never once be thanked by history. Somewhere in the house where you're lying now, listener, there is clean linen folded in the dark, and it did not fold itself, and somewhere a machine is murmuring through the wash with the same patience Ellen poured by hand, hour after hour, the same water, the same work, 470 years downstream. Some things don't change, the work doesn't change, the keeping doesn't change, the tired body in the warm dark at the end of it, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way the tide takes the river, without asking, without hurry, the way it took Ellen Marsh in her loft above the washhouse yard, off Long Southwark, 4.5 centuries ago, with the wool dripping and the fire banked and her sister warm against her back. Let the yard go dark. Let the bells rest in their timber cage until morning. Let the bridge carry its sleepers, and the river carry its boats, and the watchman carry his staff away down the street until you cannot hear it any more. Let the bucket stand empty, and the poles stand bare, and the stone lie wrapped in its wool. Let the day be paid and the ledger closed. Let the noise quiet. Let the world fade. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest, all of it, every hour. Take it and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.